Disclaimer. It's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination. What happens when Mark Wahlberg, the tough, straight-talking Boston native who prides himself on discipline and family values, sits across from Michael Strahan on Good Morning America to debate whether self-driving cars should be prioritized for older adults. It started fictional interview as a calm discussion about innovation and safety. Michael opened the segment by discussing how new technology might make life simpler for seniors, enabling them to travel freely without fear or reliance. Mark nodded respectfully to begin with, but as the subject switched to trusting machines rather than people, he leaned forward with that unmistakable Wahlberg passion. Freedom isn't about allowing a robot take your mom to the shop. It's about keeping us robust enough to do it self. The room fell silent. Michael smiled, but it was the type of smile that uttered, "We're going to have a real debate." What ensued was one of Good Morning America's most heated exchanges all year. Part generational conflict, part moral debate, and part raw emotion. Before the cameras stopped rolling, Mark's remarks had sparked a national debate about technology, dignity, and what it really means to take care of the people who once took care of us. Millions would soon be arguing about who was right and whether self-driving cars, our progress, were just another way to make us forget what independence truly means. The studio lights glowed warmly as the Good Morning America cameras panned across the cheerful set. Michael Strahan sat upright in his chair, that familiar, easy grin on his face, projecting calm confidence. Sitting opposite him, Mark Wahlberg inclined slightly forward, fingers interlocked, that indomitable edge in the set of his shoulders conveying how seriously he regarded the subject. Michael began with a suave lead-in. "Listen, Mark, we both know our parents' age group isn't getting younger. The reality is, autonomous vehicles could revolutionize their lives. Imagine elderly people being able to travel to appointments, see relatives, or simply run errands independently without relying on someone else." Mark nodded, his face serious but resolute. "Yeah, I understand, but I'm concerned about what we sacrifice in the process. Independence isn't a form of movement. It's a state of mind. You remove the effort, you remove the struggle." The crowd murmured just enough to indicate that they were invested. Already divided, Michael pushed softly. "But you've got to acknowledge, safety is important. We're discussing lowering accidents, assisting individuals who perhaps should no longer be driving. Technology may save them from themselves at times." Mark let out a little laugh. "That is the very thing that frightens me, Mike. When we begin saying save them from themselves, where do we stop? Do we begin saying that about everything? Eating, exercising, raising children?" The atmosphere was tense. What had begun as a talk of cars was becoming something more. An argument about control and autonomy. Michael leaned forward, his tone measured but tinged with passion. "I believe it stops when we save lives. If a machine can perform something safer, smarter, with less risk, why not use it? You're discussing pride, but I'm discussing parents who can no longer drive and yet still wish to live with dignity." Mark's jaw clenched. "I'm not opposed to assisting people. I'm opposed to substituting them. You ever realize how all beneficial things end up costing us something? We're informed technology is all about convenience, yet convenience destroys character. You make life too easy, people forget what it means to have to fight through." Michael smiled with civility, but shot back. "I hear you, but you can't bench press your way out of growing old, Mark. Time has a way of catching up with us all. If autonomous vehicles provide our parents with some extra years of mobility, isn't that good enough?" The crowd laughed at the gentle swipe, but Mark took no offense. His face grew stern. "It's not about being strong, it's about purpose. You remove their purpose, their struggle, the incentive to rise and go, and what do you have? A warm chair. And a machine living their life for them." The tension was now palpable. Whoopi Goldberg, guest hosting that morning, looked nervously in the direction of the control booth. Even she could feel the energy shift. Michael remained composed, responding with rational calm. "I believe we can provide people both purpose and security. You of all people understand that technology is not going anywhere. It's how we apply it that counts. If autonomous cars keep families connected, keep individuals safer on the road, why not welcome it? Mark breathed in, his voice cooling but no less passionate. Because every time we welcome a shortcut, we lose something true. Mom would take a drive through Boston just to go see her sister. It wasn't simple. Traffic, bad weather, but that was her freedom. You give her an autonomous car. Perhaps she arrives quicker, but she is no longer driving. She is merely a passenger. The crowd fell silent. It was one of those few moments where Mark Wahlberg was not acting the movie star. He was a son recalling his mother. Michael was softened. A little, feeling the genuineness. I admire that, Mark. I do. What if one day she couldn't make that drive anymore, though? Wouldn't you want her to have something that still afforded her freedom, even if she weren't behind the wheel? Mark hesitated, the question suspended between them. That was the spark. The moment the discussion ceased being about policy and began being about people, what started out as a debate about innovation had become raw and intimate, something about whether progress gets us better or simply more isolated. The camera focused on Mark's face. His jaw clenched again, but his eyes spoke otherwise. Turbulent, thoughtful, perhaps even vulnerable. Then Michael saw an opening and smiled faintly. I think we agree on one thing. We both want our parents to be free. We just have a different path to get there. Mark nodded curtly, but his tone reduced to a whisper. Yeah, I just think freedom is doing, not observing. The words hung in the studio atmosphere. The audience did not applaud. They merely watched, feeling that the actual debate was just beginning. Michael Strahan leaned, settled back into his chair, folding his hands, his broadcaster smile back in place, but with a flicker of challenge behind it. You? No, Mark, I understand the passion, but when I speak to my mother, she says the same thing that every parent says. I don't want to be a burden. If autonomous vehicles enable her to remain independent, that's not weakness. That's intelligence. Mark crossed his arms. Yeah, but smart doesn't necessarily equal right. We continue to behave as if technology is a magic solution. First, GPS. No one reads maps anymore. Then smartphones. No one communicates face to face. Now cars that drive themselves. At what point do we just not show up anymore? The audience applauded, resoundingly agreeing with him. Michael didn't blink. You're considering the worst of it. I envision a potential 85-year-old man who had his license revoked but would still like to go see his grandkids. You're telling him to stay home 'cause he can't drive anymore? Mark breathed out through his nose, his Boston accent becoming more pointed with feeling. No, I'm telling him he ought to have help. Real help, not some disembodied piece of code. Perhaps his son needs to appear more often. Perhaps we stop farming out love to computers. The crowd breathed softly in shock. That line was a punch. Michael shifted in his seat, his voice flat, but firmer now. So you'd prefer to see family mired in guilt and duty rather than provide them with something that actually gets it done? Come on, man. Not realistic. Not everybody has the time or the money to act as chauffeur for their parents. Mark came back with a snap. Then perhaps that is the problem, Mike. Not the absence of self-driving cars, the absence of time, the absence of care. We've done life so busy, we don't even take care of each other anymore. Whoopi Goldberg, seated between them as guest co-host, interrupted with a smirk. You two are essentially arguing about whether robots ought to rescue us from ourselves. The audience nervously laughed, diffusing the tension momentarily. But Mark continued. Listen, I'm not this anti-tech caveman, he said, leaning in again. But let's be realistic. Each time we turn over control, we lose a piece of what makes us human. My old man used to repair his own car in the driveway. Now you can't even lift the hood without a computer guiding you. That's not progress, that's dependence. Michael lifted an eyebrow. Your dad would prefer someone crash rather than have faith in the tech. Mark shook his head. I think he'd prefer people learn, get Better, remain vigilant, not simply give up when things become difficult in life. Michael laughed, a little of the NFL locker room voice coming out. But that's easy when you're young, healthy, and can still drive. Wait until you're 80 and your reflexes are not as they used to be. Will you still be saying, "Let me do it myself then"? Mark did not bring, "Yeah, I will." Because dignity does not come from being perfect. It comes from attempting anyway. The studio fell silent again. You could hear the soft whir of the stage lighting. Whoopi glared at them, obviously conflicted. "All right, gentlemen. We have two sides of the same coin here. Michael's speaking safety and autonomy. Mark's speaking soul and dignity. But what about when the two crash?" Michael interrupted before Mark had a chance to respond. "Then you make a decision that saves lives. Look, Mark, I honor your perspective, but technology isn't taking away humanity. It's filling out humanity. These vehicles don't take away dignity. They return people time they'd otherwise be losing." Mark let out a faint chuckle. "Time? You mean time to look at another screen as a robot taxis him around? You call that living?" Michael's tolerance was wearing thin. His tone became harder. "You're talking like technology is the enemy, but it isn't. It's what we do with it. If a person is shut in, alone, or afraid to leave the house, and a driverless car puts them on the map again, that's a plus." Mark's tone fell to a low growl. "Until it takes our place. Takes our place. It's a real car, not a clone." Mark bent forward, unfazed. "It's mined with cars, then with its caretakers, then teachers, friends, even therapists. Next thing you know, you're standing around. Things that mimic care rather than people who do it." The crowd applauded once more, some nodding, others looking ill at ease. Michael locked eyes with him. "You're scared of change. That's what this actually is." Mark sneered. "Nah, man. Scared of being lost." That hit home. For an instant, even Michael was silent. Then he regained his composure, turning the energy around. "You speak about meaning, but you're not remembering what technology can mean to someone who is feeling left behind. You never consider the elderly man who had his license taken away from him, whose children reside 2 states away. He cannot simply call for assistance. Self-driving car provides him with freedom again. You'd rather take that away for philosophy." Mark's eyes darkened. "Freedom is not sitting still while something else moves you. That is not freedom, Mike. That is sedation." The audience gasped again. Whoopi attempted to interrupt. "All right, now before one of you throws a chair." Mark raised a hand, smiling faintly. "No chairs, Whoopi. Just truth." Michael exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I simply believe we've got to move forward. That's all. Each generation is confronted with change. This is ours. You adapt or get left behind." Mark's response came like steel. "Sure, but if adapting means we lose who we are, then I'd rather be left behind." The audience erupted into applause, half cheering, half arguing among themselves. The program had obviously struck a chord. Whoopi finally leaned forward, her voice even, but waited. "Oh, right, people. This one's getting serious. We'll take a brief break, but when we return, does technology actually bring us together, or are we all just kidding ourselves?" When the camera cut away, Michael and Mark remained in their seats, neither giving an inch, their faces frozen into a stony, seething standoff. The battle lines were drawn, and when the cameras returned on, it would no longer be about cars alone. It would be about the type of world they wanted to be living in. The cameras returned from commercial to a tighter, more intentional set. The studio lights lowered slightly, creating a warmer light over the table. The atmosphere had shifted, less like a morning chat with a buddy, more like a cultural reckoning. Whoopi, attempting to restore the mood, started, "All right, welcome back to Good Morning America. We've got actor and producer Mark Wahlberg here and of course Michael Strahan." Michael remained standing, making a wisecrack with a smile. Whoopi merely smiled weakly, but all could tell. The tension remained present. "You two were before the break," she went on, "discussing how technology impacts our grandparents and parents. But I believe it's more than that. We're wondering if we can trust machines to take care of the people who made this country." Mark nodded, gaze unflinching. "That's right on the money, Whoopi. We discuss innovation as if it's empathy, but it's not. It's convenience masquerading as progress." Michael leaned forward, no grin this time. "So you'd rather they just suffer? You'd prefer a 75-year-old risk their life on the highway because it's more human?" "I'd prefer we recall what being human is. When my mother needed assistance getting around, we didn't create her a device. We arrived. My brothers, my sisters, my cousins, we made it work together. That's community. That's love. Not another app, not another gadget." The crowd applauded. Some even stood up, briefly, nodding along. Michael waited, then retorted. "That's beautiful, man. But that's not everyone's tale. You're fortunate. Other individuals don't have a family that appears. You're speaking as though every senior's got a Wahlberg family just waiting to roll out at a moment's notice. Most individuals are alone." That sentence hovered. Mark blinked, surprised for a moment. Michael went on, his voice gentle but biting. "I watched my mom work double shifts when I was growing up, squeaking in the door just in time for dinner. When she ages, I don't want her waiting around for assistance that may never arrive. I want her safe. If an autonomous vehicle gets her to the doctor instead of missing yet another appointment, I'll take that any day." The crowd nodded, some muttering in assent. Mark hesitated, then leaned forward once more, his tone lower now, almost intimate. "I appreciate that, Mike, but you're forgetting something. The minute we quit arriving, even when it's difficult, that's when we lose something wholly. I'm not declaring tech bad. I'm declaring it can't be substituted for effort." Michael leaned forward, as well. "It's not substituting effort. It's broadening it. It's providing us with greater reach, greater ability to assist. You believe that an 80-year-old individual does not wish to rely on their children for each small thing? You think they don't feel guilty whenever they ask someone to drive them somewhere?" Mark's tone hardened. "You believe that they don't feel isolated when they see that the world no longer needs them? When all the things they established are managed by code, written by some 20-year-old who's never spoken to his own grandma?" That hit home. The audience was silent again. Whoopi looked over at the producers. No one dared go to commercial. Michael let out a breath. "So what's the solution, Mark? Just keep things the way they are. Let people get left behind because we're afraid to step forward." "No," Mark said quietly. "The solution is to evolve without wiping ourselves out. We can have technology, but it must serve humanity, not substitute for it. And presently, it's doing the very opposite." Michael nodded his head. "You're being theatrical. Perhaps, but you don't get what I'm getting. Kids these days don't see their parents. They FaceTime them. Neighbors don't speak. They text. And next thing your car won't even require you to drive it. It's yet another thing which is telling us, we don't need you anymore." A shiver went through the audience. Someone actually uttered out loud, "That's true." Michael attempted to counter, but Mark's words carried weight. He wasn't preaching. He was confessing. "I have 4 kids," Mark whispered, "and each time I see them with their phones, I think about the kind of world they're going to inherit. If they grow up thinking convenience is love, we've failed them. Because love's supposed to be inconvenient. That's what makes it real." For a second, Michael said nothing. The camera zoomed in, capturing the tension growing in both men's faces. Michael's rained frustration is raw conviction. Michael then finally spoke. "I understand. I really do. But I also know what fear looks like when it's masquerading behind tradition. People did the same thing with electricity, with the internet, with every adjustment that ever arrived. You can't save individuals by locking them in the past. Mark's eyes slit. And you can't rescue them by shutting them off from life. Disconnection is not a product. It's a choice. That was a zing. Mark sat back, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The studio fell totally still for almost 10 seconds. Then softly he said, "You ever ridden in the car with your dad giving you driving lessons?" Michael furrowed his brow, but nodded. "Yeah, sure." "You remember that moment, his hand on the dash, that little nod when he finally said, 'You got it. That's more than driving, man. That's a rite of passage. You take that away, you're not just changing transportation, you're changing relationships.'" The crowd erupted into applause again, some even cheering. Michael's voice was calm but firm. "And what do you do when that same dad is no longer able to drive? Do you let him crash out of nostalgia?" Mark's look changed. Pain crossed his eyes. "No, you take away the keys when you must, but you don't substitute him with a machine and say you love him." The audience cheered again. Whoopi attempted to broker, but it was obvious the hot-button emotional moment had come. This was no longer a debate about technology. It was about legacy, love, and the creeping erosion of human touch in an increasingly digital world. Mark's last comment in that portion captured it all. "You continually repeat that safety is important, Mike, and it is, but a safe existence is not the same as a whole one." Michael let out a breath, staring at him like he was deciding between acquiescing and pushing back. Whoopi, feeling the feelings overflowing, finally spoke gently, "Okay, we need to take a break, but when we return, what does a whole life even look like in a world constructed by machines?" With the cameras going dark, Mark's jaw tightened. He gazed at the desk, then at the audience, as if he wasn't sure if he'd overstepped or not stepped far enough. The tension wasn't between him and Michael any longer. It was between generations, between ideologies, and the next exchange would determine which one would walk off first. The tension on Good Morning America had been brewing like a storm front, and by now both Mark Wahlberg and Michael Strahan appeared ready to explode. The agreeable smiles were no more. The studio felt smaller, tighter. Even the audience was kind of holding its breath. Michael leaned forward, speaking in a sharp but calm voice. "Mark, I understand where you're coming from, but you're drawing this picture where everybody's a hero for saying no to progress. Not everybody has the privilege to drive themselves at 80. Some need assistance. And if a car can do it safely, that's not compromising on humanity. That's prolonging independence." Mark shifted his head, his eyes narrowing. "You're not getting it, Mike. I'm not that we can't use technology to help. I'm saying that we've forgotten to teach people to value control. With everything we make easier, we remove something else. My mom, she's 78. She drives every morning just to get her own cup of coffee. She says it makes her feel alive. You remove that and what do you have left?" Michael exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "No one's trying to take anything away, but not everyone's mom is like yours. Some older people are afraid to drive. Some can't see. You give them a car that drives itself, suddenly they can see their grandkids again. Isn't that more freedom?" Mark's jaw clenched. Freedom that relies on a server remaining online isn't freedom. It's dependency. You believe the individuals constructing these vehicles give a darn about grandma coming to see her grandchildren? They care about power, information, money. And when things do go wrong, who gets the blame? Not the firm. The individual in the vehicle, defenseless. The crowd was moved. A woman in the front row nodded solemnly. Michael picked up on it, and his tone warmed just a bit. "You're discussing power, Mark. But we can't disregard reality. There's a generation that's afraid of losing mobility, and self-driving technology might give them a second life. Why turn that into a conspiracy?" Mark laughed dryly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Because I've seen what happens when we give up too much. It begins small. Cars, phones, assistants. Then one day you don't recall how to find your own city without a screen. I don't mind assisting individuals. I don't like rendering them helpless." Michael folded his arms, reclining. You're still hung up on this helplessness thing. It's not helpless to adjust. We used to call planes unnatural. Elevators were risky. Technology's always frightening. Until it's not. You don't think seniors shouldn't have that same opportunity to adjust? Mark's tone lowered. Quicker. Now, but somehow more weighty. Adjusting is one thing. Submitting is another. My worry is that we're creating a society that says to our elders, don't take the trouble to learn. Just press a button. That isn't respect. That's disregard. Michael had his mouth open to answer, but Mark didn't give him the chance. He turned to the camera instead. Ask yourself this. Do you want your parents' lives in the hands of a machine that doesn't know them, doesn't care about them, and can't be held accountable if something goes wrong? A murmur ran through the audience. One older man shouted, "He's right." Another countered, "That's fear talking." The atmosphere had shifted from debate to raw emotion. Michael held his ground. You keep talking about accountability, but people make mistakes, too. Distracted driving kills thousands every year. AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't text. It doesn't drink. If it can save lives, why not utilize it? Mark snapped back immediately. Because it doesn't care either. It doesn't comfort. It doesn't compensate for instinct. That human touch you're fighting to protect in your argument, AI, will never imitate that. We'll wake up one morning and understand that we substituted care for convenience. Michael hesitated, his expression tempered by just a degree. Perhaps, but I believe you're undervaluing the amount of good that can come from making people feel empowered again. Technology doesn't need to supplant empathy. It can stretch it. Mark stared down for a lengthy moment and whispered, "Until it doesn't." The words hung in the air. No one said anything for several seconds. Finally, Rob and Robert intervened tenderly. "Gentlemen, we'll have to break it off. This discussion isn't finished." Mark didn't look at her. He simply leaned back, eyes still on the floor as if going over every word he'd spoken. Michael glanced in his direction with a combination of respect and anger. When they went into commercial, the studio exploded. Half the audience for Mark, half for Michael. Backstage, producers hushed urgently into headsets. The argument had become something more, a philosophical chasm over how to remain human in a world constructed by machines. And both men were aware it was not just cars anymore. It was about trust, identity, and the unspoken fear of becoming obsolete. Mark looked one final time at Michael before the cameras resumed rolling. His voice, when he finally broke his silence, was weary but controlled. "Perhaps that's the thing, Mike. We just keep labeling it progress, and we never took a moment to consider what we are losing in the process." The studio fell silent once more. And although nobody mentioned it, everybody sensed it. Something in that room had irrevocably changed. When Good Morning America returned from commercial break, the atmosphere in the room had changed. The applause points were missing. Nobody felt, such as clapping. Instead, there was this silence, the kind that comes after people knew they just saw something genuine, something that sliced through entertainment. Mark Wahlberg sat quietly on the edge of his chair. He wasn't pumped anymore. He was reflective, almost serious. Michael Strahan, too, had mellowed out. The typical TV glow in his voice was absent. He was leaning forward, elbows on, at his knees, studying Mark as if he was attempting to read the man, rather than debate him. Robin Roberts finally spoke. "That was something. Gentlemen, both of you presented us with a great deal to consider. Prior to closing, I want to ask you, what is the true fear? What is at the core of this issue for you?" Mark breathed deeply. He glanced downward at his hands before responding. "It's not cars. Not exactly. It's what happens when people no longer feel useful. My mom said something to me once that I will never forget. She doesn't want to be taken care of. She wants to live. She said the most frightening thing about aging isn't the pain, it's feeling invisible. I believe technology is making it worse. We substitute presence with programming and refer to it as compassion. His words fell lightly but had weight. Michael nodded slowly. I get that. I really do. My dad, he's 75. He still drives too, but I worry every time he gets in the car. I don't want to take his pride away, but I don't want to lose him either. So, for me, this isn't about control. It's about protection. It's about doing everything we can to make life safer for the people we love. Mark glanced up, catching Michael's eye for the first time since the break. Perhaps that is where the true conflict lies. You're attempting to save them. I'm attempting to remind them they still count. Both are born of love, just different types. The crowd remained silent. You could see heads nodding. Older viewers, younger ones, even the crew working behind cameras. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was two men standing on opposite sides of the same truth. Fear and love frequently bear the same face. Michael sighed softly. Perhaps the solution's balance. We train the elderly to utilize the technology, yet we keep them human to human connected as well. Perhaps we cease building all of this to supplant people and instead create products that reconnect them. Mark's expression softened. That's what I am praying for, because when we lose our ability to connect, no amount of technology is going to be able to repair that. Robin nodded. So, what is everyone at home taking away from this? Mark smiled weakly. Educate your parents, your grandparents, your neighbors on how to do something new, but also spend time sitting with them. Speak. Don't have screens speak for you. Progress for the sake of progress accomplishes nothing if it forsakes the heart. Michael leaned in. And don't hesitate to use the resources we have to safeguard the individuals you love. Technology is not the enemy. It's the motive behind it that counts. The talk had become quiet, earthy, nearly intimate. Mark rose, smoothing his jacket, obviously in a hurry to go. But before he departed, he glanced back over his shoulder at Michael and extended his hand. Michael shook it without question. Good talk, Mark murmured. Even if we don't see it the same way. Michael smiled. That's what makes it worth having. Mark nodded with a slight bow to the audience, and then he walked off set. The studio watched him go with their eyes until the doors closed behind him. For a moment, there was just the buzz of the lights. Then Robin, barely whispering, said, "Right there. That's what conversation needs to look like." The audience finally applauded. Not the raucous card variety, but the real variety. The type that occurs when individuals find out they've just heard something that counts. Michael remained in his seat, gazing down at his hands for a second, a faraway look in his eyes. Then he glanced up and spoke quietly. Perhaps that is what frightens us most. Not the machines, but losing how to be human. Robin nodded, her voice quiet but full of meaning. Perhaps the future isn't about substituting connection, but reframing it. The cameras pulled back, the music of the show creeping in unobtrusively. Mark Wahlberg's words lingered long after he was gone. Progress is worthless if it forgets the heart. And for a few precious moments, Good Morning America was no longer a talk show. It was a mirror revealing to everyone watching how vulnerable and how desperately human connection still is. If you experienced that moment, be sure to subscribe for more influential debates, emotional face-offs, and memorable TV moments. Leave a comment below. Is technology advancing or damaging our ability to